Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to own their power, create influence and impact, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time to leverage your expertise, resources, and relationships to build your business, brand, and badassery. So just click subscribe and let's get it. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast with my special guest, Libby Gill. Libby is an executive coach, leadership expert, and award-winning author. She guides leaders to inspire purpose and drive performance. Her clients include Bank of America, Disney, Intel, Microsoft, Sony, Wells Fargo, and many more. So, basically the big hitters. She's also an award-winning author of 6 books and is the former head of communications for Sony, Universal, and Turner Broadcasting. Welcome, Libby. I'm so glad to have you today.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm happy to be here.
I know. It's like, this is full circle for us, right? So
it is. Yeah, we've gone on a bit of a journey together.
Yes. So we met 2 years ago 2018, actually, when I was deciding to transition out of the full-time practice of law into speaking and training and consulting. And we got introduced. I don't even remember how we got introduced. Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I remember. I think you just found me from somewhere.
Yeah. But it was one of those things that I was looking for someone who was where I was aspiring to be. And when I met you, we spoke on the phone and I was talking to you and I had researched you, and then, I had my sister talk to you.
Oh, I forgot that. It was, yes, you needed to vet me further, which was lovely. And then I met you and your sister in person.
Yes.
And we compared our sparkly sandals that we both had on.
Yeah. Yes. We really just hit it off. But, I want to talk to you about that, your role in terms of being a coach and helping women like me. But before I go there, I want you to go back a little bit, because we talk about you being, the former head of communications for Sony and Universal and Turner Broadcasting. Those are big roles, but your life didn't start out that way. It wasn't that, somebody just picked you up and plopped you into these places. So tell everyone, just a little bit about your background and how we got to where we are today.
Okay. Well, I came from one of those off the charts, dysfunctional family, and a lot of drama and a lot of trauma in my early life. And it was just kind of a sink or swim. One of 6 kids, and the oldest one died when I was 10. The whole family changed immediately. My father left my mother to marry his own psychiatric patient, and life was just a kind of a big chaotic mess for many years. And there are just 2 things to do when you either become resourceful and self-reliant, or you cave to that kind of trauma. And I don't know where it came from, but even as a teenager, I can remember sneaking self-help books into the house, hiding them under the mattress so nobody would make fun of me for reading books about how to change your life. I was convinced at about age 13 that it was on me to figure out how to have a better life. And I just kind of devoted myself to every day is going to be a little bit better than yesterday. And then I put myself through college, waiting tables, got a degree in theater, so useful for the business world, and minored in dance, and then started kind of knocking around Hollywood and did silly things. I was a tap dancing bear, and I was a talking Christmas tree, and I was a hand model, goofy stuff. And then I realized I was not going to make any money as an actor. I just didn't have any connections. I'm not sure I had the courage that it took, the guts to take all that rejection. So I found a job in public relations, which wasn't anything I'd ever set out to do, but I found it was partly the gift of language and the gift of being able to get along with people. And 5 years, I went from being an assistant to being a department head and a vice president. And what eventually became Sony. And that sort of led me on a path. I did that for about the first 18 years of my career, then went on to Turner Broadcasting and Universal, and then finally said, I've kind of done it. There's nowhere else to go. I'm going to try something new. And I started training to be an executive coach and kind of hung out a shingle and said, okay, I'm a coach now. And now it's 20 years later.
Yeah, I love that about you because it almost tracks the way I think about life not being linear, right? So you talk about all the things that you did before you got into Sony and before you got into Universal, and you would think theater, this, that they don't go together. And I think that's such a lesson. What was it about you, Libby, that you knew that you could go from, having a degree in theater to, being the dancing bear to, no, I'm going to go do this and, and look around and get myself into Universal and Sony?
Well, it was interesting. And we've got young, grown-ish children. And it's interesting to look at how different it is, I think, not to sound like an old timer, but it's a very different world today. And the challenges are quite different. For me, I didn't really have any resources. I had to get a job. And I started when I decided, okay, I went to grad school to be a therapist and then decided, I've had enough crazy people in my life. I don't think I want to do this. And they didn't have positive psychology back then, or that would have stuck. That would have really appealed to me. But I thought, I don't want to listen to other people's problems. I really have a passion for the arts and entertainment. And then I grew to really love business. And ultimately, coaching married those two, this sort of human behavior and how people think and the business world. So I'm glad I never became a therapist, because then when I work with great people like you form a friendship, you get to keep them. And it all crosses over. And that's the great joy. But I didn't have a choice. I just felt like I got to get a job and I better be good at something. And I really wanted a job in development, which is the development of television or film properties. And those jobs were pretty coveted and a little bit harder to find. And I just felt like I got to take whatever is given to me. I didn't know I could hold out. I didn't know I could hang on for what I really wanted. I just felt like I better be expedient and get a job. And I was offered a really nice job in the PR department of a company that Norman Lear, who's a great television mogul, had started. And I felt like I was pretty lucky. And then it turned out I was pretty good at it because I was a decent writer then. I learned how to be a much better writer. And I was a good people person. And I was willing to work really hard. And there was some crazy, all-nighters and all that kind of stuff. And I was okay with that. And it got me excited. And I learned a lot about business and a lot about people. And then learned a lot about language. And I became sort of the go-to writer. You'd think people that work in public relations and marketing would be great writers, but not necessarily so. So I became sort of the go-to writer of whatever department I was in. And I loved that. That was fun.
What do you mean that you learned a lot about language, and how has that served you?
Well, you have to look at messaging. And once you learn that messaging is a verb and it's not just the noun of message, then you've sort of crossed a threshold. But it was really about how will this land with the public? So if I'm writing a press release or a press kit about a television show, and I have a friend I'm still friends with now who reminded me of this story years ago. She used to work for me at Sony and then at Turner Broadcasting. And she said she wrote this press kit and she was so proud of it. And it was her first press kit. And she brought it to me and I said, it's really good, but it has no heart. And she was shocked to hear that. And I didn't even remember that story. She remembered it 30 years later. But it was, you had to appeal to people on an emotional level. And now I'm staggered that anybody who has a business can figure out how to do that, because it's not easy. So I learned from pitching stories, and sometimes you're pitching stories to the media about a really bad sitcom or a really trashy talk show, and I worked on all of those, that you have to find some angle that makes it land, that makes it special. And when I was, this will really date me, but back in the day when Xena Warrior Princess was a huge cult hit.
I remember.
Do you? And it hadn't really, the company hadn't done much with it. And I said, this is a female power icon. And I pitched it to outlets like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal as that, and it caught on. So that taught me, when you find that specific sort of emotional hook to something, people will pay attention, they will listen. So it
Yeah.
obviously worked with you because you reeled me in, or I reeled you in,
We
based
reeled
on
each
what
other in.
exactly, exactly.
You know, and I think that's so important about what you said, like the messaging. I know for me as a new entrepreneur, that is part of it. That's a hard part, right? They're always talking about copywriting and all of this stuff, and that is such a hard part to understand the language. And as you transition, so you're out of the corporate world and you transition into coaching and speaking and training. Tell us a little bit about why you did that and where you are now in that space.
Sure. Well, initially it was about career transition because I made some unusual moves within the corporate world. In the entertainment world, I went from heading up corporate communications at Universal into a reality programming just because I was looking for a change. And I took a step down. I used to say I worked my way down the corporate ladder until people said, don't say that. That diminishes you. But that's what I did. I lost one of my senior VP stripes, and it was so much more fun to work on the programming side. And I started sort of experimenting and writing blog posts and writing for people's websites. And I kept telling the HR people, I'm doing this now and I'm doing, and they thought I was nuts. And finally, like you talk about getting your freedom papers when they say, goodbye, you've done what you were here to do. My company, I was no longer under contract, and they came to me and said, because it had expired and the company had been purchased, came and said, well, you need to renew your contract. And I said, I'd rather not. I'd kind of like to be a free agent for a while. And then I wrote my first book, and they came back and said, okay, they couldn't figure out a conflict because it was a parenting book. It's like, how does that conflict with any of our sitcoms or our talk shows? But they just didn't like it. So they said, you can either abandon all that other stuff you're doing and sign a new contract. And I said, no, thanks. I think it's time to move on. And just by luck of the draw or divine intervention, they gave me a 6-month consulting deal. So I had a great landing there as I transitioned. And so it was then about helping people how to make moves in their careers. Initially, how to get into the entertainment industry, or in some cases, how to get out of it. And then that just grew and morphed over time. I did a lot of work in branding and helping experts. I think of them now as early stage experts, really establish who they are and their messaging and where they want to go next. And then eventually that just turned into more and more leadership. So it's really about coaching entrepreneurs and business owners to be leaders of their own business, or corporate executives to step up the ladder to be better, stronger, more effective leaders so they can continue to grow and take on an enterprise-wide view of the organization, not just their job or their team, but that they're really making an impact on the company.
Yeah. And the lesson in that, as I listen to you, the lesson is to not be afraid of change and not be afraid that if somebody says no, right? Or if you want to say no, that you just say no, right?
Yeah,
And to take the risk, to move forward. Because you could have just said, okay, well, I'm not going to write my book.
right.
I'm not going to do what I feel like doing, what is in my heart to do, because somebody else has a problem with it. And for you, you were not going to have that.
And it was pretty high stakes because I was the sole support of my family of 4. And it was like, am I making this bet on myself? And I just thought, I've really overstayed my welcome in the corporate world, and specifically in entertainment. I just didn't really find it wasn't nourishing my soul. And what I loved was in the corporate world, I did love the strategy piece. It was very interesting to pitch a story and see it verbatim in the trade papers or, in a newspaper the next day. It had everything but my byline, which is when that story landed exactly how you wanted it to. And that was a good training ground. I mean, there was a point where I could negotiate the company's not prepared to comment in paragraph 3, but give the reporter what they needed on background to write a favorable story. So you get pretty good at this horse trading and making your message land, which is a great skill for anyone. But really developing people's careers is what lit me up. I got excited about helping people chart that course, because at that point, I think organizations are much better at it now, but certainly entertainment was one of the last to think about things like career path or employee engagement. They would have laughed me out of the boardroom if I had uttered the phrase employee engagement. It was kind of, there's someone cheaper and younger than you are. Don't let the door hit you on the butt on your way out. Thank you. So I felt it was my job to make my team happy and productive and figure out their career path. And I loved that side of the business. And that, to me, is what coaching really is.
Yeah. And you were really good at that with me in the beginning, right? So when I was making the transition and thinking about what it is I wanted to do and to be, who I wanted to be as a speaker, I think that that's really important. Who I wanted people to see me as and to be. It was so important to have you at that moment because, like you said, it was the career path. It wasn't just, okay, you're going out there to speak, right? What is it that you want to say? Who do you want to say it to? How do you want people to perceive you? And I think that that was so important. And, as I'm listening to you, talk about your story, I can see now like where that really comes from in terms of, telling me no to certain things, right? Or maybe not so much on certain things. And really understanding that. And I know now when you're talking to executives and you're talking to leaders in companies, one of the things that you talk to them about is like leading through change and challenge. And we have had so much change, right?
And a lot of challenge.
And a lot of challenge.
Yeah.
So when what does that mean for you, Libby, leading through change and challenge?
Well, first of all, change is a given and a constant, and it was before COVID and it will be after. And so leaders that can be flexible and adaptable, and yet at the same time, find that balance of being able to make all those segues and detours as needed, but never lose sight of the big picture and the end goal. And it's really about, and I guess this is what got me through life, it's really having a future focused vision, seeing where you want to be and worrying less about how you're going to get there, which unfolds a step at a time. And really knowing, and with you, Kelly, you've got this big, effervescent, fun personality, which I love, and certainly did not want in any way to squelch, but you also have this razor sharp mind. And it was like, wait, let's make sure people see how brilliant you are. And then they're going to see how fun you are secondarily to that, because we want you out in front of people with, you've got your JD and you've done this and you've done this and you've gone through all kinds of changes in your own career and life. And people need to get the depth of you before they get the humor and the fun that you bring to the table. So it was really finding kind of that balance. And I think that's what we all strive for as leaders. I coach a lot of women leaders, and I think because they choose me. And everybody's got their sort of sticking point of, I've got one leader that's just at the precipice of the C-suite and was afraid to be mean and kind of grew up like, oh, you're so tough and you're so mean, which I didn't see an ounce of that in this beautiful, smart woman who grew up inside the company. So she has all the institutional knowledge, but no formal leadership training. And when she saw, oh, no, you don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to say, oh, Kelly, you're so great. Would you do this? You just say, Kelly, I need you to do this. And not only are people not unhappy about that, they prefer direct leadership. This is what you want. Oh, yeah, that's crystal clear. So seeing that and understanding, oh, you can dial up being direct and straightforward, even if it feels to you like, oh, was that mean? No, it wasn't mean at all. It was just leadership.
Yeah.
So
Do you find,
finding,
Libby, that's interesting. So between being mean and direct, have you found in coaching women that that is really something that we struggle with because we have attached, right, directness, or other people have attached that, right, to us, that
yeah.
if I'm direct, I'm being mean. If a man is being direct, he's being authoritative.
Yes, I see that all the time. And it's less often what I just described and more often other people saying, she's got sharp elbows. And they've all got their own way of saying she's too strong or she's too powerful, she's too aggressive. And everybody's got their code for that. But I've heard them all. She's hard on the furniture. One
I haven't
person,
heard that one.
I know, I thought that was hysterical when she was told, one leader, like, should you be a little hard on the furniture? I thought, oh, that's the name of a book, Hard on the Furniture. But yeah, often they're told that. And there was a leader that I worked with, female leader at a big tech company, who said, people see me as this and they think I'm assertive and I can scare a few people and blah, blah, blah. And it came out to some of her more junior people. She needed to be maybe a little bit more tenderhearted, but 90% of the people, and I do 360 assessments, so I get other people's points of view, loved the fact that she was direct and straightforward. There was no kidding around. You knew exactly where you stood. And which, by the way, is that's how I like to lead. That's how I like to be led. I don't want any surprises. I want somebody to be able to come to me. And lots of people find that feedback is so confrontational or awkward that I'll give them code like, okay, tell them that, we're going to be relentlessly honest here. And that's code for, I'm about to give you some feedback and it's hard for me and it's hard for you, but I have to do it. But it's so seldom. I mean, when I was in theater, and I would get a few times I got you need to work on your voice. Your voice needs to be stronger. Years later, when I was working on a speech with a Shakespeare teacher, I thought, I'm going to hire a director. That'll be more interesting to work with the theater director. And I said, yeah, they used to tell me in the corporate world, not the corporate world, in the theater world, you need to work on your voice. She said, oh, they say that to every woman. And I thought, oh, that's just like they say you're too assertive in the corporate world. And I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah,
Like,
everywhere
well,
has it.
what else? Yeah, that's what they say.
Everywhere has it. It's a little bit crazy because it does hold us back from, taking the leap or taking the risk. The other day when I was watching TV and I saw, a male attorney show up in a space and I was just like, this is horrible. And I did a video and I called it The Audacity of Mediocrity.
Oh.
And what I was talking about was that men will show up regardless, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They maybe 60% or unprepared or whatever
Yeah.
it is. They're like, you know what? I'm showing up. And we so often as women don't do that. We feel that we have, and I know that it's because of, how we are perceived in the world and in the workplace. But I so want us to just kick those doors down and just step into those spaces, because I think a lot of us, even in our perceived mediocrity, we are light years above, some of our male counterparts in those spaces. And so I love that when you're coaching women, that you're showing them that. And you talked about this, the 360 assessment. I know that you have a proprietary process. What is a 360 assessment if people don't know?
Yeah, a 360 assessment is an assessment where you go out and you talk to the client's colleagues. And it's meant to be 360 full circle, that you talk to people who are above, maybe the direct supervisor or senior level stakeholders. You talk to people who are peers, who are lateral to the client, and you talk to people who are beneath them. Typically their direct reports, so that you get this full view. And what's interesting is that some people are great at managing up and they're not so good at managing down. Women, I find, typically are more often good at managing down. They're more comfortable with people beneath them, who are not as high a level or highly skilled or as long in their career. And that's a little bit more comfortable. It can be very scary to manage those people that are above you. And I had a pretty good training in that, because I worked with a lot of high level men Always reported to, I think through most of my career, I reported to a chairman of something. And it was funny, back in the corporate days, public relations and communications often would report into marketing, even though it's a very different function and discipline. And I always refused. So if somebody said you're going to report to marketing, I was like, no, I'll report to the president or the chairman of the company. This is not a marketing function. It's completely different. And if they, I wasn't interested in a further conversation if they didn't see it that way, but everybody did. And so once I convinced them that communications completely, this is not paid advertising, this is not marketing, this is how you put a message forward that's editorial and you make it land based on the way you position it, as opposed to you pay for it and you put it in the newspaper.
Yeah.
So, but it was knowing, and even today as a coach, it's, if somebody says, well, how do you do that? It's like, this is my process. This is how I do it. I am the expert at this. And so with the 360, back to your question, I first start with a self-assessment. So I would ask you, Kelly, about 10 big areas of leadership and management, and ask you for your own commentary. And I also ask for a ranking. How effective do you think you are in this area? So if you said in your relationship building, you're a 7, that's a real strength. And then I talk to a dozen colleagues and they come back like, oh, she doesn't get out of the building. Nobody knows her. And it comes back as a 3, that average of what other people have to say, along with the commentary. And of course, it's all anonymous. But you see, and I've had people have some real wake-up calls of, well, I think I'm this. What? Are you kidding? They said that? I had no idea. And often it's just it's not a malicious, intentional, slight or anything. It's that people just don't recognize how they're perceived.
Yeah.
And, we just got to have our blind spots.
Yeah. We don't, we're not sure. We think we show up a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But we don't necessarily show up that way. And I found that in, doing some of the training that I'm doing and talking to leaders, and I talk to them about bias and those types of things. And yeah, there is like a disconnect, that cognitive dissonance between, and then you have this resistance sometimes when you realize that, and you're trying to justify as opposed to getting the lesson and trying to create the change. So when you have those, so I think I'm a 7, everybody else, no, you're really a 3, maybe somewhere in the middle, you're a 5. How do you get somebody from, this is what you think, but this is how you're showing up? If there is some resistance to that difference, what are some of the tools that you use to move them beyond that resistance?
Well, first you talk it through, and some people are incredibly self-aware. They are dead on with how their 360 results come back. Other people, utterly clueless. They just don't see it, or they don't believe it. But these themes emerge very quickly, especially when you talk to a number of people. And it's never kind of a gotcha thing. It's just hey, you don't realize when you are on your phone as your team is trying to talk to you and you're reading, through your emails, that they feel disrespected, or they feel like you don't value their opinion, or you're not using time well with them. And so what I do next, after they understand, and I do this as a face-to-face interview with people. I don't do a check the box. I don't do a tick off. I just don't think that gives you enough context. So I do a very thorough interview and then bring all of that back in writing in a report to my client. And there's some pretty tough ones when it's like, I told somebody that he was broadly seen as a drama queen, and he was shocked. And I use people's language so that they hear, this seemed mean-spirited. And that's a hard thing to say. So I talk them through that. Sometimes it's gently, sometimes it's really bluntly, depending on how they react. And then we put a development plan together. Once we've agreed, out of these dozen things, here are 3 things we need to work on. And it's typically 2 or 3 things that arise as it's a communication issue. It's a team building issue. You've not built a cohesive team. You've not put people in the right spot. Sometimes it's a systems process issues. So we identify what those areas are, and we do that in agreement. And then we build a development plan. I call it a DAP, a developmental action plan. And those are based on, we're going to take this area, communication, we're going to address that in terms of very specific action steps that we're going to take that will address that disconnect or that gap. So it might be something as simple as you're going to warm up your emails. You send back this, letter K, which means, okay. Proceed. Thank you. That may not be enough. I had one introverted leader who people thought, what is she doing all day? I literally walked into her office and she's got her giant screen blocking the door. So I said, okay, first step is we're moving. And really, she was introverted and it was hard she had 40 people on her team, which was a lot, and about 10 direct reports. First step was move the screen so people can peek in and see if you're there. The door's open. Then it was every day you're going to pick 3 people on your team that you're going to do a little pop your head in their door and say, hey, you got a second? And it was a Post-it note on her laptop. So every day it would change with 3 people. So they're not going to know that we've got a formula, but you will know what you have to do. And then there was another, it's like, okay, and now when you get off the elevator and your office is right to the right off the elevator bank, you're going to turn left. You're going to see a brick wall on that side. You need to go all the way around. One day you're going to turn left and work half the floor. The next day you're going to turn right and work the other half of the floor so people see you.
Yeah.
And I even sent her to a wardrobe consultant because there's a woman who was, she was a senior vice president and she dressed like a teenager. I said, you can be and it was a media company, very casual and hip. Yep, you can dress casually, but we got to sharpen you up a little bit. And no, you don't sit in the back of the room because you're letting your people, shine. You got to sit at the table with your people. So sometimes they're very simple changes that people just convince themselves, oh, it's okay if I do this. I'm really just honoring my people by keeping my mouth shut and never saying a word at this senior management meeting.
Yeah,
so.
No.
No, exactly.
No. And I love all those little things because sometimes we think that in order for us to create change or to make a difference, we have to do something so huge and earth shattering and life changing. And no, it's just move your computer. Move your monitor so somebody can see your face, right? Something just as simple as that. So Libby, I know that you're doing your coaching, you're still speaking. Well, the rest of us,
yep.
however we're speaking these days, whether live or virtually. But I know that you're also working on a new endeavor, and it's called the 2X Club. So tell us about that.
Oh, this is so much fun. I not only corporate executives, but I coach a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs like you. And what I'm finding, and now more than 2 million people in COVID have left the workforce, many forced out, others who've had to start a second job and that's taken over for them. But this is a group for women. And the idea of the 2X is to earn twice as much and work half as hard. So it's about getting smarter in the way that you work. And it's a group of small business owners and entrepreneurs. We meet once a week, and I do this with 2 other expert friends so that we've got experts, 3 experts, 4 pillars. So we go through mindset, all the things we're talking about, setting those goals, figuring out what your obstacles are, how are we going to hold you to it. Then the next week we work on systems and processes. Do you have a CRM? Do you have an email marketing system? All of those kinds of things. The next week is marketing and sales. And those are intentionally together because they are paired, marketing and sales. And then the 4th day of the month, the 4th Monday, we have an open Q&A day. So it's everything you're working on, questions you have. Let's pull up your CRM and show you how to set this up or that up. And it's really great to have this community of women. We're not excluding men, but it's women are showing up and who become very supportive of one another. And that's the magic of bringing the right group together. And, I'm knocking wood, but I feel at this stage of life, people are finding me that are the people I want to work with. And the group dynamic is so great because you can keep it very cost effective. Well, just like you do, that's from Ladies Who Leverage. It's cost effective. It's a lot more fun. You learn as much from each other as you do from your host or your guide or your mentor. So that's what I'm doing now. And people can learn about that on my website or just email me and I'll give you the scoop. And it's just a great way to stay on track. And we've got this group of smart ladies, everything from the television business to financial planners and everything in between, just working on. And some people, one person is starting a whole new career. I've got a person who I know as she's my hairstylist. She owned a salon for 30 years and I coached her, and, I got great hair service, and she started a whole new coaching business in a completely different field, went out and got certified, shut her business down in the pandemic, and is starting over. And it's so much fun to work with people like you. Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm going to try something completely new, which is what I did. Yeah, I do too.
I love, so you mentioned Ladies Who Leverage, and I love that, just the dynamic of having the women together. So we do our bi-monthly summits and just having that time to have conversation around what we're doing, whether it's personally or professionally, and just being there for each other and cheering each other on and supporting and seeing all the changes and the wins and even, the lessons. I don't call them losses or failures, like the lessons that we can share with each other. So that you don't make that same mistake, right? My life is a master class for you. And so, use the lessons that I've encountered to move yourself forward. So, Libby, before we wrap up, one of the things I want you to tell me is, what do you want to be in your next life?
Well, couple of things. I would love to be the matriarch of this fabulous, huge family with a bunch of kids and a few fosters and a few adopted. So that's the purposeful side of me. But really, I would love to have a killer Broadway voice and do musical comedy. If I could do that, oh my gosh, that would be the most fun on the planet I could possibly imagine.
Oh, wow. That sounds great. Going back to the theater, right? Where you began.
Exactly.
Right?
But
this is what happens. So Libby, I know that you have your own podcast. So I want you to tell everyone about your podcast and also tell everyone how they can get in contact with you, especially if they want to know about the 2X Club.
Yes. My podcast is called Libby's Leadership Lab. You have been a guest, and that'll be coming up shortly. And you can find that anywhere you find your podcasts or listen to podcasts. And anybody that's interested in 2X Club or coaching, just email me at libby@libbygill.com or hop on my website and check me out. And you can shoot me an email from there.
Libby, thank you so much for joining me. I am honored. And I don't even, when we met, I couldn't even imagine that this is what we would be doing, right? This wasn't even on the radar, which just goes to show that you just have to keep moving, right? Yes. You just have to keep evolving. So thank you for being a part of my journey from the beginning and still on this journey with me. I appreciate you.
It has been so much fun, and I cannot wait to give you a big hug in person sometime soon.
Yes, that'll be awesome. Well, you take care.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. If you're a badass woman who's ready to take action to live life unapologetically AF, then you need to join our global community on Facebook, Ladies Who Leverage. And remember to subscribe to our podcast. And until next time, let's collabosource, strategize, and monetize.